Good morning. This is Bob Passy again, and I'm going to talk about the change that everyone can pretty well agree is absolutely necessary, and it's really a matter of our survival. Today, I'm going to talk about this in a framework of the new millennium. A couple decades ago was the beginning of this new millennium. And I want to suggest that this is really the beginning of a chance to have a democratic millennium. In other words, a millennium that's based on the people and the needs of the people and how to really provide a good society that sustains the lives of not only the world, but the people and encourages their growth and development as human beings. You may look at this new millennium and say this has been pretty much of a disaster because all that has happened in the last couple decades is that we've had much more repressive kind of system, and the people in power that power has been concentrated more and more, and the voices of the ordinary people have been pushed out almost completely. I want to explain it this way. Part of it is to understand what's going on. You have to have a perspective of how to put things into focus. So if you think about democracy has tried to be successful through the end of the last. Maybe it's always been tried to be successful because it's part of the nature of life, but in the last millennium, at the end of the last millennium, last century, there have been many attempts to have democracy, and of course before that we had the United States being formed as a kind of a possible society based on democracy, and that worked out kind of in a lumpy way, but every once in a while we chose democracy very clearly in the Civil War, and of course before that in the American Revolution rather than the colony of England, and again in the 1930s with FDR, so we had a period from the 30s through the 60s where democracy began to flourish pretty well, but then at the beginning of the 70s, business stepped in and said, wait, we can't have this democracy thing getting out of hand, and they began to be more and more repressive about the ideas of democracy. And that at the beginning, but in the 2016 election, for instance, we saw the system crumbling. That election showed the total dysfunctionality of our political system. And probably the key element, as far as I was concerned, was the fact that the one sane voice of the people that could have led us in a different direction in Bernie Sanders and his campaign was they just slammed the door on that. They were not going to allow their power to be challenged by someone, and by the people, basically. And so we have political parties and political system, and basically a society even that is not functioning anymore on a human scale. Part of what's happened is that they have, over the last several decades, been hollowing out and emptying the American dream and the society of its meaning. We talked about hollowing out of corporations and hollowing out of jobs and the unions, and hollowing out of the military by privatizing it, and hollowing out basically our American spirit by making us not anything more than sort of economic units that to be used and drained of all our resources, whether it's our ability to work for them or in the later years any resources we might have stored up. At the end of life, often to get the very last drop of our resources, if you have known anybody who is in assisted care or memory care units, they cost an arm and a leg, and they quickly drain any resources that are left. It's just like they're not going to let anyone leave life without getting every last drop of their economic blood. So we have this system that is old and dying. I mean, in the last election, nobody believed anything about it. It was a ridiculous election because there was nobody to vote for that anyone cared about, other than being angry at one or the other. And we've been distracted about that ever since. But we need to somehow break away from that system. And part of what I'm suggesting is that the new millennium is intended to be the final notice to, we better pick up our citizenship tools and stand up and make the change, because otherwise we're going to go down with the ship. And because they don't care about us. They just don't care about us. And if we don't stand up, and we don't need a leader in order to do that. Well, the whole idea behind citizenship is that the people have a voice, and they get to have a voice. Our voice has been totally taken away from us. And so how do we go about doing that? Well, one thing is we have something to go back to. That is, not that I want to suggest that the democracy of the 1930s is a perfect fit for now, but the basic ideas, the basic principles behind democracy simply are as true now as ever. And of course they need to be adjusted for modern situations, but we need to go back to democracy. We need to stop putting all our time and energy into either supporting that system that exists now, and without our support it would crumble. But somehow we're left having to survive in that system, but also in our spare time, in our leisure time, in the time that they do not control, we can begin to support those things that are democratic again. We can begin to show them that there is another way to live, and we can begin to show other people. The insiders are not going to pay any attention to it. We can do anything we want, and they're just so sure in their power that, because they're believing that we have to confront them almost in a military way and wrest power away from them, and they don't realize that we don't have to do that. All we have to do is move to a system that is working better. We just simply have to choose democracy and slowly withdraw from their system. And there are people who have already done that. There are people, the organic farm movement has, and almost all of the people that are working on issues have in some way, I mean, they're behind them all is we need to go back to democracy in order to resolve these issues. So we all know on some level that we need to unify under democracy. It's sort of like if you're living in a house that is being eaten up by the termites, you can't just walk away from the house. You need a place to live for a while, but while you're living there, you are very busy in your spare time, building a house that does not have termites and that will not be susceptible to termites. The other option is you can stay there and you can kill termites every day and think that somehow that's going to happen. And even if you killed them all, the house would be so eaten that it's not a safe place to live. So we need to understand that we can work within the system of realizing it's kind of a rearguard action while we spend most of our time showing everybody, including ourselves, that democracy can work, and spending time rebuilding our democracy so we can eventually simply walk away. They cannot exist without our support. And that's really what I'm trying to say is it's a new millennium, and we shouldn't be discouraged by the domination of these old systems that are being so repressive right now, because we have the tools as individual citizens. If we will pick them up, if we will choose to remember our empowerment and that they cannot stop us. I'm not talking about a fight. I'm not even talking about confrontation. I'm not even talking about resistance. I'm simply talking about, it's like going from a church that no longer serves your purposes to a church down the street that does. So those are things to think about right now, and hopefully it's helpful to have some direction to go. All right, that's all from now. Thank you. Bye now.